The Ballad of Robert Charles. Robert Charles was a proud black native Mississippian who went to live in New Orleans around the dawn of the 20th century. Mr. Charles was self-educated, highly intelligent, and very well read. He followed the teachings of the controversial and radical black leader, Pan-Africanist Bishop Henry M. Turner. Bishop Henry M. Turner, a native of Georgia, USA, preached that blacks should defend themselves with guns against the Ku Klux Klan and other white racist institutions that sought to destroy and kill black people in the United States. Being a man of religion and action, Turner also urged blacks to start seeing God, the benevolent and merciful one, in their own image, instead of in the popular image of the oppressors, which belittled their humanity and labeled them inferior. Robert Charles also felt that black people should consider returning to their ancestral homeland of Africa, in particular the nation of Liberia, which was founded by former black U.S. slaves in 1822 to escape from the white supremacist power structure in the United States of America. Mr. Charles was also a sales agent for Bishop Turner's magazine, Voice of Missions, which talked about some of the previously mission beliefs in exact full detail and analysis. In 1896, Robert Charles joined the International Migration Society, a group which advocated sending black Americans to Liberia. Mr. Charles honestly felt that no black person would ever receive full treatment and justice as a citizen and human being in a country where the violent lynching of a black person took place every day. This country was also the same place where blacks were not even allowed to vote or receive equal treatment and protection under the law. The Plessy versus Ferguson ruling of 1896 by the U.S. Supreme Court had legalized segregation, or separate but equal. This, in theory, meant that blacks were allowed to be treated separately but as equals of whites. However, in reality and practice, this meant that blacks were forced by law to endure harsher, more unfair, and inferior treatment by whites. One day, Robert Charles became infuriated after hearing, or rather reading, the grisly news of the fate of a black man in the Atlanta, Georgia area named Sam Hose. Hose was ruthlessly lynched by a large white mob for killing his white boss in self-defense and allegedly raping his boss's white wife. The rape allegation later proved to be false, as Mr. Hose was nowhere near the house at the time the alleged rape took place. He was actually arguing with his boss about pay that was owed to him. And he was also responsible, Mr. Hose, for taking care of his ailing grandmother and his mentally retarded brother. The lynching of Sam Hose, by all accounts, was very gruesome and traumatic. Mr. Hose's nose, ears, toes, fingers, genitals, and tongue were all cut off while he was alive, causing him great, excruciating pain. He also was skinned alive, doused with kerosene, and set ablaze while tied to a tree. Hose's mutilated body parts and postcards of the tragic event were later sold at stores, picnics, and other functions throughout the Atlanta area. This horrible and tragic event, as well as its aftermath, troubled and inspired the great human rights activist and social scientist, Dr. W.E.B. DuBois, a professor at Atlanta University at the time of the lynching. DuBois started to take and engage in a more proactive, progressive, and demonstrative stance on equal rights for blacks that eventually led to the formation of the NAACP and to the modern American Civil Rights Movement. However, for Robert Charles, an expert marksman and gun owner, the sickening, ghoulish affair meant getting revenge, paid for in blood. On July 23, 1900, a hot and steamy night in New Orleans, Robert Charles and his friend, as well as roommates, were confronted by aggressive and racist cops on the suspicion of being suspicious. While waiting for his girlfriend and her female companion on the steps of their residence. After being physically assaulted by the cops, Robert Charles drew his gun in self-defense and fired at the two cops. Later, one of the officers, Officer August Mora, admitted that he did draw his gun first. Charles was injured in the leg after being hit with return fire. He escaped police custody, and for several days in July 1900, New Orleans erupted in thunderous riots and chaos. The New Orleans riot of 1900 was one of the worst in American history. The black section of New Orleans was decimated by a large and furious white citizen mob. Many innocent blacks were killed, including white folks that looked at black. Estimates stated that as many as 5,000 to 10,000 whites from different parts of Louisiana, as well as from several states including Texas, Alabama, and Mississippi, took part in the melee. Eventually, Robert Charles made his last stand on Friday afternoon, July 27, 1900. Before Charles was taken out by a 19-year-old medical student at 1208 Saratoga Street in New Orleans, he made sure his Winchester rifle did a lot of talking. Of the 50 rounds that Charles shot, 27 found a human target. In all, Charles killed 7 white people, including 4 police officers. After Robert Charles was killed, the white mob proceeded to fill Robert Charles' lifeless corpse with bullets, 37 in all, and to beat and stomp him beyond recognition. His body was later taken away by a patrol wagon for autopsy. Charles was buried early Sunday morning on July 29, 1900, in an unmarked grave at Host Cemetery, the same place where jazz legend Buddy Bolden is buried, to prevent the white mob from re-lynching and mutilating the body for souvenirs and sale items. Later, jazz and blues musicians paid tribute to Robert Charles and his heroic stand by playing a song entitled The Ballad of Robert Charles, a song which cemented Robert Charles' place as a black folk hero for many in the black community. Unfortunately, the song is lost to posterity because, according to jazz great General Morton, many musicians forgot the song due to fear of retaliation from white patrons and white people in general. Many whites, as well as some blacks, were eager to forget and not address the causes and effects of that particularly sad episode in American history.